Reeves, SVP of Product at Zenefits, VP of Corp Dev at Workday, to which she sold her company. She started a company called Gridcraft. She was a co-founder and CEO of that. And prior to that, the VP GM at Citrix, where she led the remote access solutions. Doesn't stop there. She led investments at SAP Ventures, and before that was a partner at Vista Ventures. So there is very little in tech that Lisa has not done. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. But without further ado, it's really great to have Lisa and Lux here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Lux, let me just kick it off with you and ask you about your personal journey. You started from India. You have a software background. You're a software engineer. And then one fine day you said, let's start Zenefits.
It was a little more complicated than that. So I did my master's in software engineering, went to work for a hedge fund called D.E. Shaw straight out of college. I was there for 7 years, worked with some incredibly smart people, got a ringside view of the entire financial build-up and the blowout. There were a lot of good learnings, which came to use later. But learned a lot of life lessons, like never play poker with a Russian bond trader. It was really good. But at the end of the day, I wanted to start my own company. It was just there. And also, what I was doing at a hedge fund was making more money with money. Did not seem like very purposeful use of my time. And what better way to go work for a startup than to know how to run a company and how to start a company. So one of my friends who was at D.E. Shaw had to go on to work for a company called Sigfig, which was meant for brokerages. So you could connect your different investment accounts, see P&L, get recommendations. They could have been the robo-advisor before Betterment Wealthfront, but they didn't. So I went to work there, incredible small team of engineers, 8 people, all of whom are running companies today. I also learned a decent amount of lessons there, including my one data point view of the world is never have co-CEOs. Like for all of you out there, if you have a co-CEO, please break up right now. Although it's one data point view of the world, it seems to make sense. So one of the co-CEOs there was fired, and he was trying to think about what to do next. And that was Parker, who was my co-founder at Zenefits. He was probably one of the smartest product people that I knew and worked with. I really enjoyed working with him. And as we were thinking about that, what to do next, this was late 2012, early 2013. Parker himself being the founder, it seems like 60% of you are founders here from an earlier poll. So usually when you're running a really small company, a lot of the administrative stuff floats to the top. You end up running payroll, you end up dealing with employee benefits, and a whole bunch of stuff like finding office spaces, and a whole bunch of stuff that you probably wouldn't have dreamt of while starting a company. Like you have this dream, you want to start a company and you want to do great things. And often when the idea becomes larger than yourself, now you have to hire people, you have to have office spaces, provide them infrastructure and administrative stuff for you to run a company, and that is all the pain that's associated with running a business. So our thesis was there has to be a better way to do this. If you're about 1,000 employees, you have the Oracles, the SAP, the Workdays, and other companies that give you ability to do all these things. Or heck, you can hire a team of 10 people to do all this stuff for you. But if you're a smaller company, there wasn't anything that was there. And the other thing that was also simultaneously happening was we met a couple of friends of ours, friends of friends who happened to be insurance brokers, and they were complaining, man, this Obamacare, commissions are going down, we don't want to work with small companies. And we asked them, so how much do you guys make? And they said they make anywhere between $500 to $700 per employee per year. And we were like, holy shit, so what do you guys do for it? And there wasn't much. So the other thing was and then we found out more, and one of the things that the Affordable Care Act did was make it easier for you to build a kayak-like quoting engine for health insurance. So when these kind of two things came together, we were like, okay, if we can make money off health insurance and provide the software that's really, really useful and needed for free, it would be a good thing. And it seemed like a good idea. But if anybody had told me back then that it would be this big, this fast, or such a roller coaster ride, I would have laughed.
Well, let me ask you, talking about, like, just to give some perspective on how big it became, $10 million ARR in 18 months, $20 million ARR in 24 months from start.
Yeah, it felt like we were going to die every day, though. I mean, it wasn't fun. It sounds pretty cool listening to that statistic now. But year one, 12 months, we ended the year at 1.3 million in ARR.
Okay.
Year two was the real growth. We went from 1 to 20 in 12 months, and that was a lot of things coming together. Email marketing took off. Our sales cycles became 1-month sales cycles because it was free. We couldn't have done all that if not for people. We had some really amazing people. And as you can imagine, if you need to implement and onboard all these customers, we literally had to go write code for some of these customers. And that's one thing that being in Y Combinator helped us. Paul Graham says, do things that don't scale. We kind of almost did do things that don't scale at scale, which is not great. But do things that don't scale is a great way to kind of try out different ideas, do different things. I mean, Airbnb, they went and took photographs of hosts themselves before they turned it into a big service.
So what's an example of something which you didn't scale?
Oh, yeah. So we built this really cool product where everything is online. You can go and enroll for health insurance. You can go sign up for stuff. But in the back end, it was all people filling out forms and actually faxing it to insurance providers. And that was the thing for the first 6 months. And at one point during the 12-month scaling from 2 to 1.3 to 20 million ARR, onboarding customers became such a pain point because to get data into the system, people would have to fill out an Excel sheet, go put it on a whiteboard, and then one of the engineers will pick it up, run a script, and then they would get onboarded. So it took us 23 days to get some basic pieces of data on an average, which was crazy. And it felt like it was an existential threat because if we did not onboard these customers, they would leave us. So we had a team of 7 engineers at that point. We just said, we're going to go offsite. We're not going to come out until we fix this problem. And we went away to a really nice place, locked ourselves down. And within 3 days, we had a solution that reduced the time from 23 days to 10 minutes, and it was fully self-service. But we kind of did not solve that problem until it became such a pain point that we absolutely had to have a solution. And that also let us have focus on what was really important and what needed to be done at any given point in time during the company's journey.
Wonderful. So one more question before I actually hop off to Lisa. So tell me about the moment when you felt that something was not quite going right here at Zenefits. Like it's kind of like going off the rails a little bit.
I think every day in the second and third year felt that way. Every day felt like this would be the last day the company exists because there would be one blowout or the other. When you're scaling that fast, it feels like everything is not working. And everything is working just well enough, and anything could be past the tipping point that it would cause catastrophic failures. This includes systems for the first 18 months, we ran all of Zenefits off one server because security was really important and we could protect it really well. But that was a point of failure. And end of 2015, we couldn't keep the database up because we just like hyperscaled the number of users. So it took us a while to get out of those kind of situations. But it really felt like every day there were going to be something or the other blowing up.
And of course, as we know, it kind of like emerged from the trough a little bit, leadership changes and everything else, and then now on a more secure growth path. So Lisa, let me actually turn over to you. And I'm going to ask you something else, which is from the earlier part of your career about Gridcraft. And you're one of the founders. Can you just talk a little bit about how this team came together?
Sure. So prior to Zenefits, I was with Workday, which is a large enterprise SaaS company focused in the HR space. And I was with Workday because I was the co-founder and CEO of a data analytics company called Gridcraft, and we sold that to Workday. And it was really, it was interesting how the team came together. I have a long career in enterprise software, and I have been an investor, and I've been an operator, but I had never been an entrepreneur. But I had invested in companies, so obviously familiar with that. And so once I left Citrix, I was thinking about, you know, what's my next gig, and talking to a couple folks when I was there as well. And I joined up with two guys from Oracle, two both deep engineers, you know, technologists. One ran the Oracle, was the CTO, chief architect of the Oracle GBUs, and the other one ran engineering for Oracle in the collaboration business unit. And it was interesting. They had known each other for years, a long time, fellow students at MIT, and I think they were like in each other's weddings or something. And they specifically, they found me. And it was interesting how the team came together. I think they had done something previously on the started a security startup, and done fairly well. But I would say they were more mature, they've been around, and they realized that there was kind of a third leg of the stool that they were missing. And they were very focused on a kind of a diverse team, diversity in terms of gender, experiences. And so they pitched the idea to me. And it was actually an idea that I could really identify with. It was something that I had experienced previously in my career. And that's how it came together. And it was fascinating because when Workday did the acquisition, and they're very, very focused on culture, it's the #1 filter by which they do acquisitions. It was, I think, very interesting for them to see kind of how the team came together and how the team was built. And a lot of good learnings came out of that. And I basically was, because my two co-founders, they didn't really like people, so they didn't really go out, try to raise money. I was definitely the face of the company. I raised the money, did the business plan. They stayed on the tech side, and then we built out the team loosely around kind of the people that we knew from our world of SAP, Oracle, Salesforce.
It's really fascinating, right? Getting into a founding team where two of the folks really know each other well, and you're sort of like getting in, and now you're the CEO.
Right, yeah, and I get that question a lot, like how did that work? And I really hand it off to my two co-founders. I think part of it is, you know, if you've been in this business for a while, there's, you know, you get a sense of what sort of works in terms of team dynamic culture. It was touched on the previous keynote, but I mean, it's so important, and at Zenefits, it's a huge focus for us as well. And it was a wonderful experience. I never felt like they didn't have my back, and I think if you ask them, they felt the same way as well.
I can't help asking here, so can you just comment very briefly on, as a woman in tech, like how was that experience? You're a co-founder, CEO, you sold the company.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I've been in tech forever. You know, I started at SAP, and that's when I first met MR.
Back when SAP was cool.
Yeah, well, it was. It really was cool in the 90s. I started at SAP in 1993, and I was there for 14 years, 9 years on the operational side, and then 5 years on the venture side. And that's what's pretty remarkable, because now you hear a lot about kind of women in venture and, you know, lots of bad behavior and things that have happened. But I was actually in venture starting in 2001, and there were very few people very few women in the business. And, you know, it's been challenging, but I've always taken it as a real opportunity because you definitely stand out. You're the only one. There aren't a lot, like the Financial Times did an article on Gridcraft, my startup, and I was one of 3 women-founded companies, you know? And so I think as a woman, you have a great opportunity to really find a niche, kind of set yourself apart, and that's how I've always viewed it. There's lots of challenges too, but I think also a lot of opportunity.
Fair enough. So I'm going to change tacks a little bit here because we have a number of SaaS entrepreneurs as well as, you know, seasoned executives here in the audience. And really to the both of you, a little bit more nitty-gritty in terms of the advice we have for them. So number one is pricing, something which is just really hard to do. And Zenefits actually went through being free, as you mentioned, Lux, earlier, to charging for it. So how did you go about that, and how do you even discover the price?
I mean, that's a great question. We were free because we did a hack on the entire SaaS model. Our SaaS contracts were with the insurance companies as a broker. So the commissions are still paid yearly. It's still a recurring revenue. It's paid out quarterly. It's a yearly contract. So we kind of knew what the price was because the commissions are fixed and they cannot change. And $500 per employee per year is good money. But when we moved to priced, we got it wrong the first time. I mean, we priced too low. And then...
How did you know it was too low?
Because we raised the prices and people still converted the same way.
That's what I would say. Never price too low. We discovered that at Gridcraft.
And the other thing, I think the other thing that's also true is people will always pay more than what you think they'll pay for.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, I don't know. So you always have an enterprise package, I guess, and do custom negotiated pricing.
The other thing I would say is related to pricing, and if you're running a trial before, don't let your trial run too long. That was the other thing at Gridcraft we discovered.
14-day trials?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're saying is start trying, and if you discover that it's low, keep actually raising it until you actually hear some kind of a
until your conversion rates fall off a cliff.
Or start high and then see. It's easier to lower it.
Right. Fair enough. So on the sales process, because once you actually have a priced product, there is a sales process which you have to actually put through. It cannot be just,
Zenefits was inside sales from day one. So the biggest thing that happened, I think, was how well our email marketing did and how well it took off. All the emails you see today are some variations of the emails that our VP of Marketing, Matt Epstein, ran back then. It was concise, it was plain text, it was 4 sentences. Just ask people for something of interest. This is what we do. Would you be interested in it? If not, do you have any advice for us? It was very simple, very small. And the year one, we converted from a cold email to a customer at 1.7%. And that was really good. The other thing, I think, from a sales perspective, that was really cool from what we did back then was 1-month sales cycles. So we used to close almost every single company within 30 business days. So that was another really, really cool thing.
And you're closing SMBs here.
And we were closing SMBs, and through completely inside sales and email marketing.
So there must be more to it than just that, right? In the sense from the product standpoint. Once they actually agreed to do a trial, how was it from there?
So when it was free, you could just sign up and set stuff up and start using it. So there was no trial. It was just there. You could use it. Once you decide to make us your broker, and we created this really frictionless form where you just go and sign once and boom, it's done. Everything happens on the back end. So it's again, how do you create the most frictionless way for somebody to use your product? How do you create the most frictionless way for somebody to try your product? How do you make it really easy for people to just self-serve and use it? Especially with SMBs. I think the key thing with SMBs is, one, you have to have pricing on your website if you're selling to small companies. Otherwise, they would even put you on the list of things to try. 2, make it really, really simple for them to try. And I think Intuit does that really well. Until you try and run payroll, they don't charge you for it. And by that time, to try everything out, you have invested so much time, set everything up, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to pay for it and run payroll. We kind of used a lot of those similar ways.
So actually have the customer experience the value proposition before you actually start extracting value from them. Lisa?
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. We ran a 14-day trial at Gridcraft. We had instrumented our product with a tool called Intercom, which gave us a lot of visibility around user actions, how friction-free the process was when they were trialing it, and it really helped us get a good handle on conversion.
So
and measure everything during the trial. See where people get stuck. Just follow users around, look at their back, and try and figure out how much ever you can. Investing most amount of time to see how you can convert from trial to a paid user without actually investing sales cycles like that. That's a huge thing.
Does Zenefits still do email marketing? I'm just curious.
Yes, we do.
That's something to keep in mind. So let's talk about network effects, word of mouth, virality, right? So there are 2 related questions here. One is, how do you measure latent demand? If you're a SaaS founder, you have a great idea, you want to measure whether actually there is demand for it, right? So come to that later. But I'm talking about once you actually have got a product installed somewhere, how do you actually engineer? Is it possible to do that in SaaS? How should one think about it?
Sure. So I think it depends a little bit what your go-to-market is. So if you're like a Workday selling big enterprise deals versus a friction-free model, at the lower end, smaller customers. So at the higher end, the whole idea around how viral it is, it's not really as viral when you're at the high end of the market, but in terms of like word of mouth and kind of just delighting the customer, it's something that really starts in the culture of the company, and if you're very, very customer focused, give them a really rich experience, design is great, they embrace the product and they want to engage. And for Workday, we never built anything big, anything new without having a customer or a set of customers side by side. And so that's sort of at the higher end, and I'll let you Lex pick it up.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that Y Combinator tells all its company is make something people want, and then build something that 100 people absolutely love over a product that 100,000 people sort of kind of like, right? Because if people absolutely love your product, they're going to go tell their friends about it. Right? So and especially a good analogy in the world today is the 5-star rating, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody gets a 4 or a 5, but think about what's a 6-star experience, what's a 7-star experience, what's an 8-star experience, what's an 11-star experience, right? So Brian Chesky from Airbnb has this great talk where he says like the 11-star experience for Airbnb is an entire procession with bands goes and picks up the guests from the airport, takes them on an elephant, have posters everywhere, they have reservations in all the Michelin star restaurants. That's their 11-star experience. And once you kind of like think about what is the thing that'll make somebody go talk to all their friends and tell all their friends about this thing, I think Workday has done a phenomenal job there, because if you talk to any HR person who works for a company that's more than 200 employees, they've made it very aspirational because all their friends use Workday, they want to use Workday. But it's something like that. It's that people will love and go tell their friends about it.
So no different than how you think about a consumer software.
I don't think it's really different. I mean, just because it's enterprise or like business software, it doesn't have to be shitty, right? I mean, nobody started out saying, I'm going to build a shitty enterprise software company, right? I think partially the problem is when you have these large sales, customizations, and the pressure of the sale, 6-figure, 7-figure sale, like you have to customize your product. And if you're really successful, you're doing $1 billion in revenue, and you don't recognize your product anymore. I think one thing that Workday did because of the PeopleSoft experience was they spent a lot of time building a really configurable product. They spent nearly $100 million building their product before selling anything. But how do you think about it that way? I think that's important.
And then there's also, just in terms of measure, things like NPS, Net Promoter Score, and there's other metrics that you can really infuse throughout your organization to get everyone on the same page about, what does it mean to build a really great product, and how do we, measure word of mouth and promoting it.
Any tips, Lisa, on, because there's so many stakeholders in SaaS, right? You mentioned NPS there. So how do you do NPS? In consumer, it's easy, put it out there, 7, 8, 9, 10, or you hate it or love it. How do you do NPS in SaaS realistically?
I think there are so many different methodologies there. The most pertinent one seems to be doing it through a completely third party who calls the customers, measures it, and then gives you that feedback. But we've also done in product, our mobile stuff has in product NPS, so that it's also a great way to get feedback from customers, and a large set of customers when you put it in product. And it's always good to know in terms of what the customers feel. We interact day in, day out with a lot of the administrators of a company, the CFOs, the CEOs, the founders, the HR managers. But to hear what employees who use the software think about it is really important to us as well. And that's a great way to get the employee side, like NPS, what they think about the product.
Actually build it right into the product as part of the user experience itself.
I think that's the best way to do it.
So we're running short of time. So for folks who are thinking about starting a SaaS venture today, I mean, both of you have started SaaS ventures, and of course SaaS itself has morphed quite a bit over the last 5, 6, 7 years. how would you, any tips in terms of how you think about it?
So I think it's actually one of the sessions later today. If you're going to start something that you're intimately familiar with, a problem that you've experienced firsthand. It makes everything so much easier. And the whole idea of storytelling, a great story, you understand the issues, it just makes the whole experience much easier. And the other thing is investors love a story. And so it's kind of a nice path toward
especially
fundraising.
what gives you an unfair advantage over everybody else. And the concept of unfair advantage is really important. So if you really know the problem, if you're really intimate with the problem, if you really have lived it, you definitely have an unfair advantage.
So investors probably love stories more than spreadsheets, I think that's what.
Yeah, we did not have a pitch deck until we did our Series B.
That's interesting. Okay. So I'm going to wrap it up with one question here. So Lux, I'll start with you. So if you were to, both from a personal and professional front, give advice to the 25-year-old Lux, looking back, what would you say? Because we learn a lot more from our setbacks and we celebrate success, I think, a little bit too much. So let's talk about a little bit of, what are the takeaways which you have and the memories which have stuck with you?
Yeah, I think I would have probably told my younger self, like, don't stress too much about things. The little things that you think are really important when you're starting out become fairly trivial.
Like?
I don't know, hiring your second engineer, or you have a team dynamics and you have to fire your first employee. It's hard, but those were not the things that I probably should have had, like all these white or and I think if you build the product right, if you keep the focus on the customer, like everything else the score takes care of itself.
So stress less.
Yeah, and just keep doing what you think is best for the product, best for the customers, and best for the company, and everything else will take care of itself.
All right, Lisa?
I think I would have, so I probably would have been younger than 25. And I would have said to get an engineering degree. So as someone who came up through the venture, the financing, the business side, it would have been, I think it would have been a great skill set to have had as well. So that's what I would have done.
So when you actually, I have to ask this question, when you actually sold the company, it was just 2 years old, right? When you sold it to Workday.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind? I mean, like, were you thinking about doing this and suddenly this offer came through the gates? Or like, what happened there?
Yeah, so this is an unbelievable story when I tell it. So the Gridcraft was only 2 years old. We had self-funded it ourselves, our 3 co-founders. We did a note, we converted the note, we raised a seed round, and then from Techstars, which is like Y Combinator, David Cohen has a private fund. And we're just chugging along, building great product, shipping it, and someone posted us on Product Hunt, and that was how Workday found us. We never in a million years thought that we would ever sell the company to Workday, and they're not an acquisitive company. We were only the 3rd acquisition they had ever done. We always thought it'd be SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, because we know tons of people there. And we even sort of like shopped the deal before we did the other deal because we were like so surprised, And that's how they found us. And they actually reached out to me via LinkedIn.
Okay.
We never, so that whole idea, like, don't build a company to sell it and stuff like that. I mean, it really just build, like Lux said, focus on the customer, build the best product you can, and then it's just really surprising how things work out.
Let luck play a chance. Well, thank you so much, Lux and Lisa. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.